Okay, I'm going to ask for a little bit of help in the sense that this lecture is going to be a bit more technical, and I'm no professional teacher. So if there's something I'm not explaining well or needs to be broken down further, please tell me in the comments so that there's a productive back and forth because I'm really trying to push for some change, especially in light of a lot of recent events and evaluating how collective consciousness is moving. So I feel that all of this content is very fitting. So let's get started. The topics we're going to cover today will be, of course, recapping to define collective consciousness. And I want to kind of insert some intersection between neuroscience, computer science, and cosmology, all which trend towards a form of efficiency and algorithmically, like at a foundational level, how that could look, memory storage, and then also just once again, kind of like wrapping together how human consciousness and cosmic consciousness sort of, mirror each other. So, before we really dive deep in technical things, just taking a step back to remember that in the previous lecture, I defined um, collective consciousness as an ecological neural network. And collective consciousness, if I've stated my viewpoint on panpsychism being the underpinning of it all, everything having being conscious. So we're specifically talking about human beings just to be a bit more organized and specific, and collectively meaning at a global level, all the shared beliefs and values. Doesn't really have to be moral attitudes. This is just an official definition online, but just, the conglomerate that is human beings and all of their consciousness combined and acting as a unifying force in society. And then defining the structure and behavior at a rudimentary level for this collective consciousness. So calling it, like saying that there's an ecology to it and understanding that the whole thing is an ecosystem. It's interconnected. There's a metabolism to it. There's energy levels. There's response and stimuli. There's like data and information and consciousness as an aspect of it, homeostasis and all that. Neural network, because there there's this behavior that we have between human beings that when the information between us, the communication becomes integrated, we behave like these interconnected nodes, and we kind of create like a supermind with all of us combined. Um, and also, we touched on integrated information theory last lecture too, which is kind of this idea that this level phi is the level of consciousness that is directly related to the level of integration a system of information has. So we are all integrated as human beings, right? And in our communication and how interconnected we are, especially through social media platforms, we too, with all this information shared, gain like a super consciousness altogether. So, first of all, I mean, I'm really doing my best to get super duper clear, on collective consciousness and how the build of everything is, because the thing I'm trying to really zero in on is dark consciousness and specifically reality-based disorders. Think paranoid schizophrenia, psychosis, depersonalization, derealization, a good chunk of these, which I've had myself. But we don't really have a bridge between Eastern and Western philosophy. A lot of things get totally lost, and we heavily rely only on pharmaceuticals. I would like to do a root cause analysis into everything. And also, there's the way we behave in society is super fascinating because there's a school of thought with people that care a lot about what is said and less about what gets done. And then the other side cares a lot about what gets done and nothing about what gets said. Both are types of information, speaking and having influence that way to inspire action, whether that's negative or positive. That is a form of like unmanifest data and manifest data. There's like a boundary, I guess, I suppose you could draw between what is unmanifest versus manifest, right? And how seriously we take certain things. And the reality is, we need to take both seriously. Like what is physically happening in reality and the way people present and speak and what their character is. And, I would like to define this collective consciousness system because I'm really tired of seeing this. I'm tired of seeing systemic issues and constantly staying in cycles, lots of extremities, mass media manipulation, a lot of corruption from world leaders, and just this idea that when you see like people kind of connecting together and really starting to put differences aside, there's this push for extreme negativity. And if I had to give a health score to our collective consciousness, I would say right now it seems in the negatives. We are ready to kind of swallow each other whole, but I want to fight this with non-dual Shiva Tantra. Anyway, don't want to lecture on that kind of stuff right now, but yeah, coming back to how collective consciousness, if I only define it as like a neural net, it would ignore like scarcity, habitat, calories, that metabolism and appetite that we have for like feeding off of certain energies and like, building a certain narrative as a result or mindset. But if it was just a pure ecology, like the technical aspect and computational algorithmic aspect of it, which is very much present, would be ignored as well. So the hybrid model combines both the meaning and the technical processing and metabolism with the learning and logistics, which is what the behavior it actually shows up as in reality. Okay, some computer science concepts, putting my degree to use. Let's see how I do with explaining all this. So we're gonna have some tools here that I want to more display in the next lecture of um, how the tools manifest in describing collective consciousness at an extremely detailed level. So just bring up the concepts for now. So typically you use data structures and algorithms. If anyone is into lead coding for interviews, software engineering, we use a lot of these. But data structures are basically methodologies of how you can store data in a system. So examples look like stacks, queues, trees, arrays, linked lists. I didn't want to make this overly computer sciencey, so if there are questions people have and would like specific, maybe like a short video on this kind of stuff explaining, I can totally do that. Coming to memory and storage. So memory is a temporary fast access storage. It's used for active programs and data. And storage is more permanent and slower accessing for long-term retention of things like files, operating systems, and applications. Algorithms, they're step-by-step procedures or a set of well-defined instructions for solving problems or doing a particular task. So they look like different types of searches and sorts. Like, for example, in a graph, there's Dijkstra's algorithm, like the path of least resistance. So another thing that ties actually both data structures and algorithms together is uh, big O notation. Big O notation and why reinvent the wheel, Geeks for Geeks had a great definition. It's a way to express the upper bound of an algorithm's time or space complexity. Don't worry, I'm going to give an example soon. It provides an upper limit on the time taken by an algorithm in terms of the size of the input. Typically, the way you calculate the worst case scenario for an algorithm is you take the size of the problem that you're trying to solve and you increase it all the way to infinity. And so once you do that, you will achieve an upper bound of like, okay, how complex or how time and space efficient or inefficient is this approach if we take this problem and make it super huge? Um, so like if you wanted to give some information to a few friends, like I have a party at 7 o'clock tonight, right? And like let's say you have four friends. And so you call up every friend and you're like, hey, come to my house at 7 o'clock. Hey, come to my house 7 o'clock. Hey, hey, you do it four times. Not a big deal, right? It's just four people. Well, what if it's 400 people? So I'm increasing the size now. So do you want to make 400 phone calls, right? Um, the number of people you call in this situation would be considered like is denoted by N. So you can think of N as like number of items, number of things. And the methodology I'm describing in big O notation would be considered O parentheses of N. And O of N indicates that the complexity that this takes is it's taking linear time because the time it takes to call 400 people is like, dependent on calling each one of those 400 people. But if I wanted to reduce the time from linear to constant and just be like O of one, then what I could do is instead on a Facebook profile or a poster or whatever, I could broadcast, "Hey everyone, I'm having a party tonight at 7 p.m. Please show up. I need to look like I have friends." Um, so that is a way that you work with like the upper limits on things as size increases because at a smaller level it's not really an issue, but typically when you want to scale something at really large systems, and we're talking about large systems here, we're talking about the human mind, we're talking about consciousness, we're also talking about the cosmos. All of these things are big, so we want to be able to work with efficiency. And I was if you haven't read it, you should check out this book, The Jazz of Physics. I haven't finished it yet, but the author describes how one of the greatest questions in cosmology is why is there a trend towards like this self-organization in large scale systems and like going towards, homeostasis? Why does the cosmos trend towards efficiency, right? And so in order to be in harmony with that, like we must be efficient as well. But in order to be efficient, first you need to find out where the problems in your system are and how are they behaving inefficiently. So that was kind of the motivation for making this lecture today. So it measures efficiency, and in computer science, it helps you optimize code. Graph theory. So I was kind of describing things like as a grid or as a little bit like of a graph. So that will be one of the tools that we also will use going forward. Graph theory, just like it sounds, it's studying graphs. You want to understand relations between objects, and graph theory makes up a good chunk of theoretical computer science research. You can do a lot of things with graphs, but in this situation, like combining the concept of like neural networks, nodes communicating with each other in a graph, in a grid. Having the geometry of that and the structure of it planned out makes it a bit easier instead of just talking about things at a vague level. Um, just some terminology. Edges are a connection between two vertices. Think of two dots and a line in between. The line in between is the edge. The vertices are one of the points that make up the graph. Recapping also the VOC levels, which are the different communication levels. It's represented as language, and it's the code that structures reality. I don't actually, I mean, it's such a brilliant concept. I don't know, like the whole when something has kind of come into creation, even with the deity Shiva, there's the damru and the drums that kind of indicate like that essentially the generative music that came from the shaking of the drum created the first alphabet of the universe, which put everything into like physical formation and creation, which I find fascinating. Similarly, the way we have these programming languages to take something unmanifest and kind of like build an application, build some software. There's a similar idea here as well, in, I wouldn't even know, a Vedic science. So here are the four levels recapping again. So para is the most transcendental sound. There's no division. It's non-dual in nature. That's why I say before any separation takes place, it is the seed of all thoughts and actions. You can also maybe even align this with Nada Brahma. The thing is, though, Nada Brahma is the deity that represents how the universe is sound, which totally aligns, but that would be like the greater set. Para would be the subset because this is more about like how humans communicate specifically. Bhashanti is where color, image, shape, form, meaning, intention, um, and communication are kind of like they're one essentially. So the way that there's a synesthesia when you're on LSD, well, there's a similar aspect of that kind of union in Pashyanti. So it is said. Madhyama is where thoughts start developing. It's where there's thoughts, within that take place. And then Vaikari is what we do. We communicate with each other. It is expressed speech. So I don't know if you guys have heard this, but at least in ancient Indian spiritual tradition, when we are talking about mantras and mantra science, or even talking about goals and dreams and things like that, and this doesn't even have to come from ancient Indian philosophy. It can come from like even hearing people talk where they're like, "Oh, don't say your goals and dreams out loud, otherwise, it loses its meaning and efficacy." And the thing the connection I'd like to draw is like at each of these levels, right, there is more and more division, differentiation, separation, specificity that takes place. And so it's cool because there's like more manifest form taking place, but at the same time, there's a little bit of lossy data with each level. And so I'm wondering if this lossy data in between each level maybe could be why people say like, oh, it's things are much more powerful when they're in your mind and you keep it to yourself. And the moment you sort of say it out loud, it kind of loses its value. I mean, of course, this isn't all the time. Like giving speeches and stuff can be very valuable, but in a more personal sense for things that are important to you. So I just thought that connection was sort of interesting. And yeah, a connection for human beings specifically, but also it's a great way to think about connecting the cosmos to human consciousness because Madhyama is in the mind, but Shanti is like I'm still trying to understand Pashanti very well, and Para is that transcendental sound. But if I may, I mean, this really could be, I wonder, a form of like reality filtering where there's maybe more esoteric philosophy that can help fill in the gaps of context. Um, and it is said too in like ancient civilizations that they could communicate at the Madhyama level, or maybe even the Pashanti level, probably Madhyama, like it's almost like would it be telecommunication? Like reading minds or sharing that way because the packet of data maintains like higher and higher values of experiential data. So you don't have to do excess communication and explanation, take excess energy to like actually go through the whole Krebs cycle. I mean, which is happening anyway, but to speak out loud and explain and use your mind and put in like physical effort, it's just happening here. So yeah, but also I can't help but wonder if there is a way that what we are seeing or seeing speech or ideas and things forming and how that filters into what thoughts get into our mind and what we eventually say, if maybe we cannot work with this type of data which codes reality and see if we can't help people in their consciousness out with whatever it is they may be going through. And remember too that there's a very intentional structure behind why certain deities, again, are like married to one another. So Brahma, being the creator, has the consort Saraswati, and Saraswati is a goddess who represents speech and wisdom, music, articulation, the arts, academia. And so there's also a version of her actually called Vak Devi, and it's really saying like the goddess and the expert of speech and being alongside a creator basically to say that without speech creation doesn't have that channel to get formed in and so I don't know, it's kind of beautiful because it makes you really think too when people are making fun of like communication majors, of course there's the way it shows up and how we go about teaching things, but I find this to be super beautiful because it really addresses the importance of language and the levels it shows up in. And I think if we can apply a lot of different um, science-based concepts, we can learn language and its power at a deeper level, cosmic level. Let's connect that with your direct involvement with the cosmos. So it's just articulation and expression, keeping in mind that creation is coded and physically manifested by articulation. The cosmos is manifesting, it's a creation itself, and it is coming into manifest form through a form of expression and coding. And since we are also part of the cosmos, we are an expression of it as well. So, as being part of this existence, not separate from it, we also need to kind of come online to really get that connection. I hope this makes sense. If it doesn't, let me know. But the greatest issue I see in society, and the reason I feel like we're stuck in cycles, chasing after things that give instant gratification, or like you make a certain amount of money, it's not enough, then there's the next thing you keep hitting and hitting and hitting, is because we believe that these things are all in some ways going to help us feel that unity with the cosmos. I really believe at the deepest level, that is what we are looking for. And that unity feeling will bring you the sense of joy and presence in the right here, right now. So we'll discuss this in the later slides in the same lecture. But if we want to maximize this expression and get that realization that we are part of this existence, not separate from it, then we need to be living in dharma. Dharma is Sanskrit for duty or purpose of your soul. Um, yeah, so it's up to us, considering that everything is part of the cosmos and conscious to a degree. There's a difference between human beings and most other creations. If you can take a guess, doesn't matter. I'm going to hit the button right now. It is self-awareness. So, self as in I. I, Shivani, did this. I, Shivani, am in a bad mood. That's sort of a thing, right? So, as soon as you say I, everything else is not I. And there's that separation already. Now, of course, I'm being pedantic. I get it. Because we're trying to like identify things and categorize things. Language helps us like communicate the phenomena taking place around us. That is totally fine. I am not talking about in discussion saying I is like problematic, but it's just we're so far down deep into this in our own identities that we forget that we are an expression of something else living through us. And we are a manifest form of that. It's just the fact that we're aware of it and we can point a finger at who we are and in ourselves that, we have a double-edged sword. Because on the one hand, we are, you know, reflective. We can say that's why they say self-reflection. We have a lot of multidimensional intelligence that can exist too, different ideas, different forms of creation, but it can become fertile ground for egoic imposition, which contributes to issues in society at all levels. These being the levels, and I'm not saying ego is bad. Oftentimes, I hear so many people talking about how like the ego is like the worst thing. You need to like kill your ego and destroy it, and like everything with discernment, man. Like, there's no need to. Why be human then? Why take birth in this form if it's just so blasphemous to even be here, right? Like, so ego gives us trajectory and direction because we're saying I. So there's a concept of how to operate. Otherwise, we'd kind of be zombified. Or other people would just use us. Um, the issue is when we don't use the ego in a way with like checks and balances with our soul or with our deeper consciousness. So that always needs to have its balance. Okay, now coming back into, I discussed IIT, which is Integrated Information Theory, but we never really talked about the generic information theory and then partial information decomposition. So again, please critique me on if I'm not explaining anything correctly, okay? So the idea with all of this is that information is fundamental to reality. There's also a PBS Space-Time video on how quantum information is always preserved in the cosmos. So information is fundamental. And IIT suggests that the integrated whole of a system is what has consciousness, which could resonate with the idea that meaning and awareness are fullest at the unitive para level. It's like the concept of um, yeah, when then with para, there's like a breakdown too when you fragment it. Probably didn't word this in the best way, but when it goes all the way down to Vicari. And so the system is not really there's not that unity. Para has that full unity. But like as you go lower and lower, there's more division and differentiation and a sense of separation. So when that kind of speech takes place, and then even the style of speech, then the language, then the intention behind that, it's the systems are less and less integrated, and you can almost see that in society and communities where, maybe people are not integrating as much anymore, or you get into like excessive individualism and you're not talking to anybody at all, and like, there's not that group consciousness, that holistic sort of sense. And remember too that this value phi is quantifying how close um, that system is maybe to a para like unity. This is kind of just a type of conclusion I'm trying to draw. But mind you, Para is not like unity consciousness per se, but para is just transcendental. Everything is there's no division. And so the higher the phi value, the higher the consciousness of that system. And also with understanding information flow, it's this stuff is applied a lot in neuroscience, computer science, just understanding networks. So I think this could be a great way to apply in brain circuits too. If we can combine understanding esoteric wisdom with consciousness and philosophy with cosmology, and understand how that information from at that level can impact us at the cognitive neurological level, maybe we can help understand at a deeper level how people are being so negatively affected with reality-based disorders. And I just thought this was kind of a fascinating like tidbit. This person has a phrase called "it from bit," basically talking about how every physical reality comes from an informational binary choice. And when I think of a binary choice like this or that, and then based on that thing, this or that, then you choose one, then this or that. So I end up thinking of binary trees every time. And it's fascinating to think about just what does it really mean for something to be manifest versus unmanifest. Um, and then also counting something. What is the idea of like counting things as you are able to observe them? And it totally is based on your observation. And the reason I bring this up is having having a physical reality come from like the decisions that we make has always led me to connect this to the multiverse theory. Like, so there's the inception of that, which is you. And this would be super complex, right? Because it's not just you in this reality, but everything else that exists. I don't even want to think about the computation that goes into it, but yeah, every decision that you make, and then there's the one you didn't make, and that could have been its own universe and its own reality. So, what I really like about information theory too, I would really encourage everybody to look this stuff up. I really believe in, people encouraging and listening to one another, but please do your own research too. And if you have anything to say back, it helps me because I believe iron sharpens iron, so it helps me out in the end. But the reason I like information theory too is almost like when we say information is fundamental to reality, to me, it kind of makes me think of how I believe consciousness is fundamental to it. And, the consciousness shows up in like a variety of different ways. There's the human way it's showing up, but like other living systems are doing their own computation all the time, their own forms of communication. And we, narcissist human beings, we view everything that's not us as is inferior. But really, it's just information we don't really know how to process. Like consciousness can be both information and energy at the same time. And based on that, I will discuss ways we conserve it later on in this lecture. Basic little breakdown of partial information decomposition, which is an approach within information theory. So the idea is you have something Y that you want to understand information about. Like I can't think of anything right now. If I have an example at the very end of explaining this, I'll let you know. But I here stands for information. Now, with partial information decomposition, there's three things that we're taking a look at. Um, just the unique information, redundant information, and synergistic information. So, unique information here, when you're trying to learn about variable y, you have source variables x1 and x2, and there's just some things that x1 only knows about y. And there's some things only x2 knows about y, but they don't share any overlap with each other. So, that's what's unique. And synergistic information is information that can only exist when X1 and X2 are combined together. And redundant information, just like it sounds, is information that both X1 and X2 have about variable Y. And redundant oftentimes can have like a negative connotation, but if I were to give it a positive one, I would say that it helps in validation. There's more points of data that hold if they hold redundant information, maybe something is true, or maybe it brings validity to a problem, or it can help express a concern because there's so many source variables that have this same information repeating throughout. So there's a variety of different ways this kind of stuff can be used. Well, the reason I also brought this up too is because I was just thinking, if you're describing communication between nodes in this ecological neural net that represents collective consciousness, we like everything that's going on is a form of data, whether it's again like in that madhyama form, maybe Bashanti form, or if it's like action that's taken place or things that people have said. And there's it's obviously affecting collective consciousness, right? And like I'm really just trying to put a pin on exactly how it all works. And so when I'm thinking about information, I'm thinking about communication in particular. Communication, what we're communicating all the time is different forms of data. And that could look like gossip. It could look like what's on the news. It could look like, oh, my friend just got married, or did you see that this person harmed ABC? So I think if we can understand how information is moving around in this way, it can help understand what's going on in people's minds. Also, oh, I was about to say something else. Okay, forgot. Maybe it'll come back to me. Okay, so there's a version of partial information decomposition called multivariate. And instead of just, how we had x1 and x2, well, this would just have more variables. And it's just more than two. And it talks about more complex relationships of the target variable you're trying to understand because there's so many other factors that come into play when now there's three nodes involved and how it affects how you get to know information about your target variable. And there's certain triples or triplets. There's calculations that go on for this kind of stuff, and it discusses how there's entropy of information between nodes as well. There's also like family subsets. So there's some set theory involved here, which would be one of the other tools to use. But there's some involvement of like okay, if we're going to make a set of like families, we would do like if it's x1, x2, x3, then if we want to make a family size 2, then the set would have x1 and x2. And then I think that would be about it in that one, because if we did x1 and x3, that can't count in the one bigger set because x1 is repeated twice. And there's some representation like that. Again, if anyone wants me to do a deeper dive, I can definitely do my due diligence and make better examples. But basically, this is all to say when I'm trying to isolate information between two nodes, like I'm thinking of that partial information decomposition. But again, we're talking about large scale things. There's multiple variables involved. So for those reasons, I think it's really important to take a look at the tools that are already available. I was actually going down this route of like thinking how to do these calculations, but there's apparently so much about this multivariate partial information decomposition, which I also encourage people like look up and see how it works. It's actually pretty fascinating. This is just so cool, this could be also an example of redundant information, you know what I mean? Like it's very validating because I for one was like building up to having these thoughts and then I like look it up online and find that there's this whole thing that's basically saying a lot of what I'm saying, but for like biological systems. And I'm just talking about the cosmos and consciousness. But it's great because it's this redundant information at a foundational level is very helpful in understanding that there is something here to help explain what's going on. I I take a lot of notes in my notebook as I get these ideas, so this is a little picture of that. As I said, as we descend from para, that transcendental sound, there's, the loss of data as we communicate, and this is where I'm kind of combining partial information decomposition and VOC, the articulation levels. So I was just thinking, I don't know, if node A and node B are talking, and we just like took this little piece and this really great big grid. Well, let's just say for all intents and purposes, it's just unidirectional. Only A is talking to B, not the other way around. And yeah, here I'm saying energy, information, and consciousness are conserved. They might even be all one. We haven't totally even defined energy yet, but anyway. So what would be going on is grid is our levels of ways of communicating. I'm technically speaking in express speech, but I totally know body language is a whole other thing. But for making this a simpler problem, I'm just trying to think about talking. So that's why I said Vaikari, the express speech. But also, before A talks to B, A is having their own thing going on in their own brain, right? So maybe they have some imagery playing, maybe there's a soundtrack, maybe there's a smell, there's intention behind it. There's also words to describe it. But I'm writing these properties down. I do dot 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 and I say experience, right? So there's a packet of experiential data, like containing several properties. And person A's job is to just discuss and express speech. So a lot of how this Vicari goes, I don't know, maybe this arrow too, like could have some type of weighted value that represents how well something is expressed in physical spoken speech form. And this is really it's related to how well person A knows how to take all of this and make it evident in the way they speak. Instead of just saying like, quick example would be like, yeah, I had a pretty good day. Like you say, oh, today was stupendous. I had my hair done and I had the best sushi in the world. And like you're going and explaining why and it smelled this way and it looked that way. And that's the way you get it. So now we look at the other side on the receiving node B. How much can person be impartial to the data it's receiving? Impartial meaning you're not assuming intention at all. You're just kind of taking things at face value, but also how close A and B are, which, of course, like if the node is direct neighbor, then it probably would indicate proximity and actual closeness. So how much can person be like not just assume intention, which you maybe feel safe to do if you know the person, right? But also there's, if you don't know the intention, you're taking things at face value. It's also how does node B interpret A's express speech or Vicari? And so I was thinking too with this whole like lossy data thing, what does it look like? And if all that's coming out is Vicari, then where does the rest of the information go? Where does that data of like what you thought? I often wonder this, like, I don't know what you guys think, would love to hear, but like if you think a thought, where does it go? Like it's not just gonna, I have always just had some intuitive feeling that there's got to be some like mega terabyte, like at a cosmic level, obviously more than a terabyte, but maybe there's a database that stores everything ever in space-time. And so I was just thinking, again, we are all part of the cosmos. Like we have memory, and the cosmos could be represented too. Like I'm talking about collective consciousness, but that's just a subset of like the full cosmic consciousness, that which is like everything in the universe as one. I'm sure it has cosmic memory too. And so there's a whole thing about Akashic Records being the great cosmic database, somehow logging everything that has ever taken place. And there's light and sound that it logs with. I don't totally understand it. I'm aware of it, but it definitely aligns with my intuitive thinking of there's some storage. Like, is anything ever lost in the cosmos? Like, intuitively for me, the answer is no. But if people disagree, I'd love to know why. So again, and this is one way this information could channel out, right? And the other way too is like, well, if person A is talking to person B, and now we make this a bi-directional flow of communication, if they assume bad intention and react based on that level, right? And they're like, oh, person A, how could you say this way? Then person A immediately, like the way the experiential packet of data is not going to maintain, it's not going to be the same. It's not static, it's dynamic. So this could, information is never like lost, it's conserved. It'll be transferred, though it could transform into something else. So the intention might change, the imagery that shows up might change. So yeah, that is kind of the idea I have of maybe how we can use this PID with how we speak because it is information it's being communicated and it comes from consciousness. I mean, there's got to be a way to model this stuff, right? And then now talking about the whole ecological neural net that is collective consciousness. Well, I was also thinking when we say something has geometry, when we say it has a shape, we're taking something that's a concept and we gave it a word, and word indicates form, um, and which indicates containment. So, like, is there anything you can think of bringing up, like any random thing? iPhone, light bulb, television, um, fuzzy toy, medicine. Is there anything you bring up that doesn't have a form to it? And is there anything you can bring up that you're not saying in relation to something else, right? Like I keep bringing up the water bottle example. Well, I mean, I think I demonstrated here. Always the water bottle. But it's water bottle because it's in discrete math, we use this notation, but it's not pizza and it's not a fridge and it's not laundry. You know, the list can go on. The water bottle is water bottle in relation to everything else. That's what that thing is. So if something has form, that there's a form of being contained. And containment means information could be stored and preserved within the boundary of that thing. So, well, I guess all the information about this water bottle would be in this water bottle, not in like a fuzzy toy. Something like that, I guess. This is just a fun thought experience. That experiment, I think it would be fun to also discuss, like when you say something like endless universe, you're giving it a form. So like, is it truly endless? Is there an upper boundary? How does that work? Okay, so yeah, talking about this grid and this graph, like in collective consciousness, what information is being passed around? Is it communication? I think. You know, I mean that's a form that's the most common form, but at a deeper level, it's really just um, sound waves coming back to Nada Brahma. Everything is expressed through sound and vibration that creates the universe. Oh, another thing I thought that was interesting. Again, I don't know exactly how to model this, but just what if how we communicate is responsible for the geometry changing shape. Like it affects the health of it. You know, maybe if like there's all sorts of poor communication, we're all interpreting a religious text in 10,000 different ways, and then there's one that's like, ah, everyone, you must go and I will prevail. And so they try to harm everybody, and that's the way communication passes around, and like collective consciousness is like contorted, and you know, so I was just wondering, like, could that be a way to build a relationship for how this geometry could look? All right, we just talked about that. Oh, and the nucleus. I think this is also important. Remember when we were talking about efficiency? Well, another form could also be working with understanding that there is a center to this collective consciousness form blob thing. And, you know, news media, easy way. It's like an efficient way to get information everywhere and have everybody thinking about the same exact things all at once, like almost in instant time, like O of one time. So I wonder if I don't know if it's just one nucleus because it can't just be the media. There's, you know, maybe there's layers and nested nuclei. I don't know, but just an idea of like how maybe things could be fitting together. Time data could be stored here. And I was talking about person A and person B like talking. It's like this person talked once, then this person talks, and this is how information goes. But you know, when all of this stuff gets it's logged, but also, hmm. Well, I mean, how would you even log everything happening in just linear time? Information travels so quickly and things are happening in real time. So the dynamics and logging that could be interesting as well. Again, I'm trying to nail how collective consciousness looks. And if people have ideas and feedback, criticisms, I welcome it all. But as far as I understand, the Akashic records are also considered outside of space-time. So it's everything that's been logged in ever. And it's because the cosmos trend towards efficiency. I can't help but wonder if like instead of saying, oh, at t equals zero, time equals zero, the state of the cosmos was this, at t equals one, the state of the cosmos was that, and so on and so forth, right? States of time. Well, it could maintain the impact of the data. It could have constant it could have constant space. Like I do think of like the metaphor of a human being and the face lines that they have, which could indicate what kind of life that they lived. So you don't need to see like every age of that person appear in front of you to know their story. You can kind of just like look at them, and the data is stored in the vessel itself, that human being. So just just a thought of how perhaps things could be moving around and logged away um, for things outside of space-time, everything that's ever happened. I want to talk about some more esoteric philosophy, which I think can actually really connect us together with the power of computer science. So I'm sure a lot of people know about the chakra system, and they all represent different aspects of us. And in tantric philosophy, we don't just go from like anahata and manipura all the way up. We are very focused on the root and the sacral as well, because there's a desire for people. I'm sure you've seen spiritual people just go like, whoa, totally out of the way, and like have no pragmatic understanding, and like just trying so hard to not be human, and it turns into escapism. Like Tantra is like, nope, you are right here. You are rooted. Um, and so these aspects represent different parts of ourselves. And in Tantra, I had a mentor. She went through meditation with me, and each one has a bija mantra. Bij means seed. I don't remember all of them, but they end in AM. And it's like rum, lum, hum. So things like that. And then finally, at the Sahasrara Chakra, it's silence. Because I mean, there's this almost like no need to, there's the transcendental sound. It doesn't need to be like expressed. Now, I know that there's also a bi-directional way of like kind of connecting. So let's say you're connected to your crown chakra. It could inform the way you are aware, how you communicate, your wisdom, how you behave in your creative energy and in love. Also, in the other way, how you work with maybe your root chakra can inform how you grow in your creativity and sexuality, wisdom, power, love, communication, all the way up here until you open this crown up. So those are all ways. What I want to talk about is how Sahasrara Chakra is actually there's 1,000 petals on it, and there's this idea with it that it is how when you talk about like a human being, like, and they're connected to this, it's like a fully realized human being, right? This fully realized human being would be in unity with the cosmos, as I was talking about before. Like that's how our deepest desire, whether we realize it or not, that's something we deeply want. And Sahasrara Chakra, I believe, also has a connection to being aligned with your dharma, and your dharma is your unique purpose, what you're here for. And we can always get into discussions about that, whether people feel like there's purpose or not, but the idea is too, this once you're fully realized, it's like you're a node that's almost like online and you're connected still. I mean, Pratityasamutpada, Indra's net, we've talked about all this. We're connected to everything else, right? And so there's also this realization that not only are you online, but you're like in connection with all that which is around you. And there's this, since you're a part of the cosmic expression, the vision of collective consciousness is being expressed through you here. So when you are healing yourself, also, so it's two parts. It's how the vision of the collective and what can be like a self-regulating harmony is like you are a part of it. We are all responsible for helping regulate the cosmos, but we are so separated due to that I, right? The egoic separation and egoic imposition of will on how things should go rather than realizing we are all one that creates so many problems in the world. But this unity is what helps us know that, like, whatever actually helps you, what's the medicine for you, actually benefits other people. Your joy is the answer. And a lot of times people think that you have to be super miserable and like really serious to get a lot of things done and impact collective society. My question to you is this. How are you going to teach somebody else something you don't know yourself? We're always talking about helping people, helping people, helping people. And I think there's like a point where you do it, it's great. But then we're talking about consciousness now, right? Like you understand that it's super important for you to be doing your absolute like best. And if you think about the people you like to like follow on social media or people you admire, you look up to, they are living in their joy and in their purpose. And it's a form of inspiration, right? Like inspire, in spirit. And when you see that people kind of naturally want to, it can have a powerful effect. You yourself are thinking, well, hey, like what about me? Like easy example, when you see your friends level up, you're like, man, that person who just never did anything in college is now having a personal trainer. He's writing a book. Maybe I should do something too. You know, it's kind of like that, but at like a grander scale. Um, and the expression of the cosmos is happening through you. So it's the most important. I'm also taking a look at my notes real quick to make sure there's nothing else I have about Sahasrara that I would like to share. But yeah, there's this unique harmony that is brought about, and joy is the seat of creation. Now, if you're in suffering, suffering ends up being a great research lab that can inform what things that we need to look within from because reality is inside out. I think, too, considering that we always want to like go around to everybody, to work on them, to heal them, to feel like that's what's going to make the world better. Like Sahasrara Chakra is kind of saying, well, actually, it's a lot easier than that. It's a lot simpler because the highest form of intelligence is simplicity as well. Nothing needs to be that complicated. It starts with you. It literally starts with you. So when you're in alignment with your purpose, I have a lecture on how dharma is the fabric of the cosmos, like at the consciousness level. So when you're in alignment here, you inspire others in other places. This is an infinite universe. There's infinite realities, right? And so being the other aspect too is like sometimes we just ignore that aspect of ourselves because we really feel that like you have to be this way or that way. It's like very like the binary of thinking, the duality, this or that. Non-dualism says this and that. God as a concept is infinite, right? And so if we are not honoring the unique ways the multiplicity of consciousness shows up, we're kind of like in a sense, prioritizing what parts of God are like God, which doesn't make sense because then God means everything, right? That's why it's super important that you and your way of being independent, your unique joy is very important. This isn't even like a pointless platitude. This is just the truth. You are important. You are so important. Let's take it a little bit to the next level, actually. So like we talked about these nodes, right, in this grid, and we talk about how online these are too. But there can be a spectrum. So there's offline, you're just dead, just disconnected from the server straight up. There's intermediate, which is where a lot of people are, which is why they're kind of like in suffering, which is a form of like understanding that there's something called not suffering. And there's like the whole search into finding that. In a fully online node would be in full alignment with your dharma. Talked about dharma as being the fabric of the cosmos, but maybe our physical universe that, it follows laws too, right? There's like a purpose to it, and we personify purpose, so that's why we're like, oh, a galaxy can't have a purpose. I encourage us to not think like human beings here and there sometimes because it helps connect dots a lot more together. So sometimes it's important to know when to say things in terms of I and also important to know when to like turn that off and see like how we can speak in terms of we or like a deeper connection to things. So if physical dharma is like maintaining harmony and order, then why wouldn't our consciousness dharma? This is my favorite part about this, that the change you want to see, it is you that's the solution to it. You don't need to do anything more than be at your highest level self in purpose. In other words, in order to have an impact on the collective that can build a better tomorrow, the cosmos have a very efficient system, and it starts with you. You are the O of one in place, constant space solution to bringing harmony in the universe. People can't know of the unique reality you bring if you're not online to share it by embodying it. People can be inspired by that. Like, never, there's a great quote I remember hearing, never underestimate um, the suffering people are going through because of your procrastination. Maybe there's something you can do that somebody else needs to see, man. I'm just saying, like, I'm just really pushing for people to understand like their importance in this reality and that I'm trying to use all these different topics to explain you belong here and you need to do your best self and you need to create. Oh, and also, how does it feel knowing it's kind of actually inefficient? It's messed up if you're not following your dreams. Your dreams matter. It's literally the highest thing you could do in your lifetime is being aligned with your purpose, activating the crown chakra. Yep. Little structure for human nodes. I don't know. This is like TBD could grow. But there's the status online, offline, dead. There's a spectrum. There could be internal data, which is like communication happening in the mind, which has Madhyama and Pashyanti, external data where some information is that communicated out loud, or maybe you're hearing out like from other outlets, number of neighbors, and then the ability to filter reality, you can with the combination of the reticular activating system, understanding the levels of Vak. So just some, again, trying to kind of get a different definition for the structure. And then that same video that I was watching with the PBS Spacetime videos, like talking about how information is always preserved. Um, and it's transformed between forms over time. There's a conservation even of probability that finding a particle in a given system is always going to be consistent over time, summing to one, and that there's a restriction on how much you can evolve these systems so that the sum of probabilities and all possible outcomes of an event always equal one. So when we're talking about the reason I brought up information being preserved is like, okay, well, how do we apply this to collective consciousness, right? So there's data that gets lost and stuff like that at like small levels, but like let's take it as far as we can. Let's talk about death. First, we'll talk about how memory and storage of this ecological neural network has to be processed somehow. It needs a structure, so energy is neither created nor destroyed, just transferred. So we typically reserve this for physical systems. This is the first law of thermodynamics. But does it only have to be a concept in physical matter realms? And have we gotten anywhere in defining exactly what energy is? And this energy that's behind consciousness, where is it going? How is it being conserved when we pass physically? So I think there's two things. Love to make up terms, makes me seem official, but there could be an essence-based preservation, which would imply the essence of the person is saved. Their experiential data is logged, tracked, and transferred until another container is able to contain that essence. And that's a form of preservation, where there's like a consistency. Maybe there's like willful amnesia, but essentially this implies reincarnation as the truth. And I just want to say, I personally, I mean, I'm still figuring it out, but I do personally lean towards reincarnation as a belief for the truth. But it's not my job to talk about what I believe. It's my job to get to the bottom of everything ever in the universe. So that's what I'm committed to. And if that means I have to challenge my beliefs, then that's exactly what I will do. But there's some content out there. There's a book called Many Lives, Many Masters too, which speaks on this topic. I'm like, it's a very fascinating book. Definitely give it a read. Pattern-based preservation would imply that the energy as a concept is preserved and conserved by dissolving back into the great cosmic grid, and there's no physical sequencing or meaning that follows up with it. So, you know, it's hard actually to go in between the two because when you think about it from a human standpoint, you think someone just had like the absolute worst life. And when they die, they could like kind of their consciousness, that the energy that's the experiential, the information, the data is like spread across that same thing from which everything emerges. So like then a plant, an animal, and a human being could emerge, and then the data is partially stored in those three areas like over time. I don't know. And it's like maybe my belief in reincarnation is partially because I just want it to be true. You want to know that there's a way you as a concept continue on, even if you physically don't. So lots of interesting stuff to think about, though. And what my favorite part about all of this is having the vocabulary for it and at least getting closer to understanding how the system works and trying to make the hard problem of consciousness a little bit easier. What's next? So, I mean, let's say 3 lectures ago, I talked about how music is that thing that's like above math and science that it produces a form of experiential data too. And haven't forgotten about that. I haven't let that go. Like I said, I'm kind of doing like a detour to get more clear on like the system itself that has the problem I'm trying to solve for and getting clear on what the problem is there. So that I brought up music because of the term nada yoga. A lot of people only know about one kind of yoga, which is the stretchy, stretchy fun time that we see that's not even like totally honoring what yoga is supposed to be like in a traditional sense. And that's not trying to be like, oh, it's, let me be technical. It's actually because it'll help liberate you if you do it the right way. But there's also like something called karma yoga too, which is yoga is just Sanskrit for unification of mind, body, consciousness, or soul. And there's different methodologies, and karma is action, and action when you are doing something in alignment with your purpose, then that would be a form of karma yoga. Well, there's also nada yoga, which is helping uplift consciousness with the intersection of Nada Brahma, which is the universe's sound. So, like, sound healing is one example. I play the sitar, so I'm just really curious about maybe if sitar and the concept of healing in that way, because there's ragas meant to be played only at certain times of the day because it affects your brain waves. It's supposed to align you with the cosmos. Really interesting stuff we could like get into. And I don't think there's really been enough research done on the sitar with raga timing and therapy with nada yoga. I think that would be really fun to see if I can't work with distortions in the cosmic consciousness field and specifically for reality-based disorders and see if maybe like working with this information theory describing consciousness and understanding philosophy, understanding the complexity of our biological systems and how it relates to meaning and purpose. And at an individual and systemic level, maybe can't help build the life that we really desperately need, which is that sense of unity and utopia that is totally possible, and you totally know it's possible because otherwise there wouldn't be such a push for horrible things to continuously dysregulate our nervous systems. And I just feel like if, power, I mean, you can totally have a back and forth with me on this, but like I tend to think that, the way we overcompensate for things, similarly, if there's such a negative push from the outside, there must be something going right on the inside. And I think a lot of people who are watching this are also becoming extremely conscious in a very beautiful way and waking up to how there's more than meets the eye. And I really appreciate that and anyone who is on this journey and watching alongside me. So thank you so much for listening. And as always, all hail the mighty cosmos and a toast to phenomenal cosmic power. I will see you in the next one.